The thing that makes Saiyan Saiyan might be unsaiyan. Hey guys, MasakoX here. Last week, we took a look into what we could find regarding the long-standing rivalry between the peoples that spent a long time dueling it out against the people of planet Vegeta. We are not talking about those snail people from that episode of Bardock thing that somehow apparently evolved into Saiyans. No, we're talking about the OGs, the Tuffles. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at the said discussion that we did last week, you can check it out up top and get yourself caught up. I mean, you could just possibly watch this now, and maybe you might be intrigued as to why the title is what it is. And also, if you're interested in more of these deep dives, be sure to subscribe. In today's discussion, we are continuing said deep dive into the Tuffles and their relationship with the Saiyans. But we are adding some very sweet conjecture of ours that we usually do. What do I mean by that? Well, Haverock and I are the self-described champions of conjecture, in that we like to theorise a lot here on things based on what we know about the series with our years of experience, as well as looking closely and inferring the evidence that we have from the archives of Dragon Ball's history, and then produce something that would seem credible in the world that Toriyama has created. Now, before we continue, we need to add an important disclaimer to proceedings. You should not take what we say as the be-all and end-all, and we would strongly recommend for you to take what you will from this discussion and then go from there. We simply just wish to entertain you with our ideas and help engage your mind, and for you to conjure up theories of your own. There's nothing like a good old bit of what-ifery. So with that out of the way, let's begin discussing the idea of Stand Power! Saiyan Power! Now, Saiyans have a lot of different types of powers that are inherent to them, as well as a massive talent for the art of battle, and the idea of pride being the forefront of their overall makeup and pretty much everything. But what we are meaning by Saiyan Power is the game-changing innate ability that they all seem to have, which we might more commonly know as the Zenkai Boost. Although having said that, Saiyan Power is actually a fanon term for Zenkai, as well as what actually makes it sort of accurate in a way. But that's besides the point. The Zenkai, in 15 words or less, is the ability that makes our favourite monkey people so overpowered, and makes years of training happen in seconds, maximum gains in minimum time. However, if you want to have a more elaborate and less basic interpretation of this skill, let us oblige. This power is what pretty much makes the Saiyans the formidable force that they are. Ever since we found out about the details of this power from Vegeta in the Namek saga against Qui, it revealed to us that this boost allows them to recover from injuries in a pretty short period of time, and become stronger than ever. It's totally got nothing to do with convenience. Absolutely nothing. And it's quick, especially if you compare it to the healing times of regular humans or non-regenerating species. I mean, Zenkai can't hold a candle to Namekian regeneration in the slightest though. Piccolo wins that battle at least. During that time of recovery, a Saiyan is instantly learning from the experiences of the loss and imprints on the injuries so as to ensure that the mistakes that led to the aforementioned boo-boo don't happen again. That makes both the body and the mind adapt, increasing one's resistance and strength, and of course it increases with the severity of the injuries. The closer that you are to the brink of passing, the bigger the gains. Now, technically, there is a caveat to this boost in that Saiyans can't just learn from performing self-inflicted injuries. It doesn't work like that. That's why instead of Vegeta injuring himself again and again to try and beat Frieza, he got Krillin to do so, in order to get the increase in strength to even try and face off against Final Form Frieza. But we also know that this can be conveniently forgotten when Super Perfect Cell had actually reared his ugly head. He had managed to hack it after he had detonated with Goku. Perhaps maybe to his Namekian genes. It could be a mutation from that, but also, if you think about it, only one cell survived. That's a pretty big gain. That's probably the biggest Zenkai boost you can ever get. Okay, Masako, slow down. Why are we talking about Zenkai specifically? I thought you mentioned Tuffles at the start and were following up on a previous video. Yeah, don't worry, we're getting to that. So, as powerful as Zenkai is and how much of a major advantage it is to possess it, you know what is kind of weird about it? How exactly this mechanic evolved into what we know it to be today. How did it get to that state? More importantly, did this evolution carry over to the opposite Saiyans from Universe 6? Well, it's sort of hard to say as little evidence for that is attainable. For now, the only proof that we sort of have on Universe 6 Saiyans also possessing Zenkai is Kaba getting a power-up as every other Saiyan does in Xenoverse 2. Sure, it's something that they share, but it's not a definitive guarantee that it's a purely Zenkai attributed boost. This may be purely a mechanical thing for the game in order to just try and streamline things for it. Sadly, we don't have a better example of proof in that they do know Zenkai. And technically, Saiyan Power is something that favors the strongest of the strong and makes them stronger. But there is one small problem with that. It's all very well and good to be injured in battle and be in the knowledge that you will get stronger. Like the old adage goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There is one major drawback with that. Someone kind of needs to heal you very quickly before, you die from your injuries. It would sort of throw the whole game out of the window if you can't make it back to base, or you don't have a medic or healer with you, or someone who could get you somewhere. I mean, it's true, Goku could not exactly regenerate a hole in his chest from the time of the Raditz battle on his own, and Vegeta definitely needed some time in the medical pod after his encounter with the other things before he could actually go back and be in the game. In order for the Zenkai Boost to be fully effective, it sort of forces a pact-based cooperation, and some amount of care from the other members of your species, something that we tend to associate with the roots of civilization in real life. Saiyans are very loyal to their fellow warriors. It is imperative for them to be so. For example, Bardock's squad are extremely faithful to their leader, despite the Saiyans being quite callous. If one of their number fell in battle, they can be carted away to safety to try and recover. This is derived from monkeys too. We even discovered that Neanderthals cared for their sick and ill in a similar fashion. Obviously not through Zenkai specifically, but sort of similar. Dr. Penny Spickens and her colleagues investigated the skeletal remains of more than 30 individuals where minor and serious injuries were evident, but of course did not lead to loss of life. The samples displayed several episodes of injury and recovery, suggesting that Neanderthals might have had a well-developed system of care in order to survive collectively. They didn't just act on their own, nor did they have an individualistic capacity. That wouldn't have gotten them very far a few 100,000 years ago, but it seems to be apparent today that is the case. But moving on. The high level of injury and recovery from serious conditions, such as a broken leg, suggests that others must have collaborated in their care and helped not only to ease pain, but to fight for their survival in such a way that they could regain health and actively participate in the group again. Saiyans, while they do help their survivors from a good old-fashioned battle with another species, they don't really strike us as a very caring race in the traditional sense. You're not exactly going to get a Saiyan wearing matron or nurse clothing with a tremendous bedside manner. I mean, quite frankly, you'd be lucky to even get a bed to have a bedside to begin with. Sure, I can imagine them healing their stronger warriors so they can get back in the game quickly, sort of like eugenics through choice, but their way of life was very much survival of the fittest. If you were beats in the time of the mud huts, you wouldn't have lasted long. Still, they did hunt in pack-like groups, but the class system kind of overshadowed the need of working together in order to grow strong as a whole. But on an individual level, Saiyans were pretty equal when you think about it. It didn't matter what gender you were, so long as you were good at fighting, you were in and respected. All that mattered was class. Oh, Saiyans, you are so close to social equity. The Universe 7 Saiyans were this way back on planet Sadala. That's the original homeworld to which the Universe 6 Saiyans still reside. But was Sadala so savage that they needed to evolve the ability to manifest Zenkai as we know it? It always seemed to us that they basically just scorched the grounds themselves in a civil war that is often talked about in resources. So let's actually think, what are the origins of Zenkai? Well, we might be able to have a fairly educated guess. For starters, we know that Tuffles in general are associated with genetic engineering, as well as having a huge penchant for technology. They are basically the antithesis of the Saiyans in that regard. This facet has since been carried through to the likes of Super Dragon Ball heroes, which is, yes, outside the main timeline, but in a way still relevant. Not that Xenoverse isn't either, and you can easily accuse us of cherry picking right now, but let's just actually think about this. A lot of the Tuffle lore that we were able to pass from our previous discussion, we have managed to acquire from Dragon Ball GT, and it still hasn't been retconned. Yet. Even Toriyama has preserved most of it by adapting certain elements of it for the history of the Scouters. We know that the Saiyans arrived on planet Plant on a mysterious spacecraft, and that the Tuffles were originally fond of the idea of having Saiyans knocking around. But we also know that according to Vegeta, however, that the Saiyans were treated rather poorly by the Tuffles, essentially like mooks or second-class citizens by the Tuffles, and forced to live in harsh badlands on planet Plant. It might mean that those mud huts weren't necessarily something that they chose to live in. This tidbit does come from GT and may be an example of pro-Saiyan spiel, but it's pretty important for our discussion. So what if the Tuffles were aware of the Saiyans for quite some time prior to their arrival on planet Plant? What if they experimented on them in order to create a more physical race that would protect them? What if they were the ones to bring the Saiyans to their subsequent new planet? That mysterious spaceship was a Tuffle spaceship! What we're proposing exactly is that the Tuffles might have tried to artificially zhuzh up the natural order by bringing Saiyans to their world and genetically engineering them for their own benefit. But we very much know that they messed up with the natural order, and their machinations, it's evident, they don't exist anymore. In fact, this tinkering might be the reason why Universe Saiyans actually turned out to be more aggressive than Universe 6's Saiyans. Perhaps the original Saiyans weren't as battle-hungry. The mysterious spacecraft, their later association with genetics, and Universe 7 Saiyans possessing a trait that pushed them to fight seem rather convenient and narratively interesting. It also makes the whole Saiyan-Tuffle conflict not nearly as cut and dry, effectively making their creations turn against their masters, something that was recently explored with Heroes and Kami-Orin in Universe 6. Do we think that this is proof positive that we could change everything we know about the Saiyans forever? No. Like we said earlier, this is just pure conjecture conjured up from multiple storylines that are not necessarily connected to the main continuity. But would it make sense? Absolutely. The Tuffles have been a fascinating subject for the longest time, and we believe that the GT root of them not simply being saints and victims of the savage Saiyans is a much more interesting plot. It's not as obvious. After all, Dragon Ball has its fair share of insane scientists or servants going rogue kind of stories. Would it be really surprising to know that something like this happened? Also, the Cold Force, or however it was called before, could still watch the whole thing going on from afar and then just simply pick up the pieces in the form of the Saiyans for their own ends. The Tuffles couldn't get to use them, so
oh, I'll just be taking these genetically modified super soldiers.
After all, a benefit of having a warrior race under your boot is pretty tempting, and what is confirmed is that Frieza's race also dabble in biotechnology themselves, so they'd be quite compelled to see the opportunity arise. We do hope that one day Toriyama or someone else will decide to tell that story in more detail. We have more information than ever about the Saiyan society, but we would like to go back further into the past, maybe even to the times of Yamoshi. Who knows? At the end of the day, Zenkai might have been with the Saiyans from the very beginning, and Universe 6 Saiyans might also have it, and Toriyama never really thought about giving it much more in-world explanation. But I think you guys know as well as us that the guy likes to change his mind on a lot of things. Maybe one day we'll find out. So what do you guys think? Do you feel that perhaps the Zenkai Boost was granted to them by the Tuffles through genetic engineering? Would you want to see more about the Tuffle Saiyan society prior to the war? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!